Classic SpongeBob seems like pure childhood nostalgia, just a happy yellow sponge making Krabby Patties with his best friend Patrick. But scratch beneath that innocent surface and you'll discover some of the most twisted secrets hiding in plain sight. Today, we're uncovering the darkest classic SpongeBob lore that fans completely missed. From episodes that accidentally became psychological horror to voice changes that destroyed the magic forever. From character assassinations so brutal they sparked fan wars, to content so disturbing entire countries tried to ban it. We're revealing why those early seasons were way more messed up than you ever realized. By the end of this, you'll understand why 2004 was the death of SpongeBob himself. Starting with the SpongeBob episode that makes literally no sense. Ever wonder how a SpongeBob episode about hiding in a freezer turned into one of the most bizarre time travel stories ever put on children's television? SB-129 makes absolutely no scientific sense. A restaurant freezer becomes a time machine, everything in the future is chrome for no reason. And Squidward accidentally invents jellyfishing while trying to escape it. Stick around to discover why this completely nonsensical episode works so perfectly and became one of SpongeBob's most legendary adventures. But before we dive into the episode, make sure to subscribe to our channel. SB-129 episode aired on New Year's Eve 1999 during SpongeBob's first season when the show was still experimenting with how weird it could get. The late 90s were a golden age for experimental animation on Nickelodeon, with shows like Rocko's Modern Life and the Ren and Stimpy show pushing boundaries of what kids' television could be. SpongeBob was part of this wave of cartoons that weren't afraid to be genuinely strange. The episode was written by Aaron Springer, Eric Weiss, and Mr. Lawrence, writers who clearly decided that scientific logic was optional and that freezers could absolutely double as time travel devices if the story needed them to. Steven Hillenburg, the show's creator, was still letting his team take massive creative risks without worrying about whether anything made sense to adults or even followed basic laws of physics. The show hadn't been sanitized yet into pure kid-friendly content. It was still weird enough to confuse parents and stick with viewers for decades that this particular episode was originally going to be about SpongeBob and Patrick time traveling, but they changed it to focus on Squidward instead, which was probably the best decision they ever made because Squidward's grumpy personality makes the perfect contrast to all the insanity around him. The production team was clearly having fun with the Millennium theme since it was airing on New Year's Eve to celebrate the year 2000, but they took that concept and ran it through a blender of pure cartoon madness. The episode's original working title was SpongeBob 3000, which gives you an idea of how they were thinking about futuristic themes, though the final version goes way beyond simple future speculation into full-blown temporal chaos that would make most science fiction writers weep. The setup starts completely normal, which makes everything that follows even more insane. It's Sunday morning in Bikini Bottom, and the French narrator helpfully warns everyone to get their earplugs ready because Squidward is about to practice clarinet. Classic SpongeBob setup. We know this is going to go wrong somehow, but we have no idea how spectacularly wrong it's about to go. Squidward kisses his clarinet lovingly and prepares to treat Bikini Bottom to some real music, which is his way of saying he's about to inflict terrible clarinet playing on everyone within earshot. But the exact moment he tries to play, SpongeBob's alarm clock goes off at precisely the same time, creating perfect comedic timing that sends the clarinet straight down Squidward's throat like a cartoon sword-swallowing act gone wrong. The timing here is like the universe itself is conspiring against Squidward's desire for peace and quiet. SpongeBob pops up with his usual cheerful energy, asking if Squidward wants to go jellyfishing, but Squidward can't respond properly because of the clarinet lodged in his throat. Every time he tries to speak, clarinet sounds come out instead of words, creating a bizarre musical conversation that SpongeBob somehow interprets as enthusiasm. SpongeBob, being SpongeBob, takes these muffled musical protests as enthusiastic agreement and announces that he and Patrick will be right over to collect their jellyfishing buddy. This misunderstanding sets up the entire chain of events that leads to time travel, temporal paradoxes, and existential crisis. If Squidward had just been able to say no clearly, none of the rest would have happened, but that's the cruel genius of this episode. It all starts with a simple communication failure that spirals into cosmic chaos. This is where the real torture begins, and the episode shows its true colors as something much weirder than a typical SpongeBob adventure. SpongeBob and Patrick start the most annoying sequence in cartoon history, repeatedly asking if Squidward is ready to go jellyfishing. But it's not just asking once or twice. Squidward says no and slams his door. Immediate knock from SpongeBob. Ready now? No, slam. How about now? No, slam. Now? No, slam. This goes on forever, with Squidward opening and closing his door about 8 times in rapid succession, while SpongeBob asks the same question like a broken record stuck on the most irritating song ever recorded. It's the kind of repetitive gag that either makes you laugh hysterically or makes you question your sanity, and probably both at the same time. The door slamming becomes almost ritualistic, like SpongeBob is performing some kind of temporal spell that's about to break the very fabric of reality. Each slam gets more violent, each no gets more desperate, and you can feel Squidward's sanity cracking with every repetition. The genius of this sequence is how it builds pressure in both Squidward and the audience until something has to give. You know this can't continue forever, but you have no idea how it's going to stop or what's going to happen when it does. The episode treats this mundane interaction like a powder keg about to explode, and in retrospect, that's exactly what it is. The fuse that ignites the entire time travel plot. Patrick even realizes at one point that Squidward doesn't want to play with them, but SpongeBob's relentless optimism overrides any logical conclusion, maintaining the pressure until Squidward finally breaks. The main event kicks off when Squidward finally snaps under the pressure and decides he has to escape at any cost. He tells SpongeBob and Patrick to wait just a second, then immediately sneaks out the back of his house like a prisoner making a jailbreak. The fact that he feels the need to literally flee his own home just to avoid jellyfishing shows how desperate he's become. He runs to the Krusty Krab, which is mercifully closed on Sundays, and finds the restaurant completely empty and peaceful. For a brief moment, it seems like he's found the perfect refuge from SpongeBob's relentless enthusiasm. He even tries to play his clarinet, savoring what he thinks will be uninterrupted music time. But SpongeBob and Patrick show up anyway, calling for him and searching the building like determined detectives tracking down their target. You can hear them outside yelling, "Squidward! Squidward!" with the kind of persistence that would make a stalker proud. Squidward panics and makes what seems like a smart decision, hiding in the walk-in freezer where they'll never think to look. The freezer represents the ultimate escape. Cold, quiet, isolated, and completely SpongeBob-free. When SpongeBob and Patrick can't find him anywhere, they assume he must have already gone to Jellyfish Fields without them, which is probably the only logical conclusion they've ever reached. They leave, and Squidward thinks he's won. He tries to exit his perfect hiding spot, but discovers the door is locked from the inside. This should be a minor inconvenience. Someone will notice he's missing and come looking for him soon enough. He's confident this will all be resolved quickly, saying, "I'll be out of here in no time," which becomes tragically ironic, given what happens next. Then, the narrator drops the most casual bombshell in cartoon history, 2,000 years later. Just like that, with no warning or build-up, we've jumped from a simple Sunday morning to the distant future. The episode treats this massive time jump like it's no big deal, which is either brilliant or completely insane. The freezer door's rusty hinges finally give way after 2 millennia of decay, and Squidward tumbles out, still frozen solid in a perfect block of ice like some kind of cephalopod popsicle. The fact that he survived being frozen for 2,000 years is never questioned or explained. The episode just accepts that cartoon characters can apparently hibernate indefinitely in restaurant freezers. Spongetron, a chrome robot descendant of SpongeBob, flies by on some kind of futuristic propulsion system and spots the frozen Squidward. His reaction is perfect. Holy Krabby Patties, maintaining the SpongeBob enthusiasm even in robot form. Spongetron proceeds to thaw Squidward out using what can only be described as a laser hammer, because apparently in the future, kitchen tools evolved into high-tech weapons. The melting process involves a red laser beam that somehow doesn't hurt Squidward, but perfectly defrosts him, which is the kind of selective cartoon physics that makes this episode work. The future Bikini Bottom is absolutely insane in ways that go far beyond typical science fiction predictions. Everything is chrome-plated. Buildings, roads, vehicles, plants, and even the people themselves are metallic and shiny. It's not just a design choice, it's apparently a mandatory lifestyle in this dystopian future. When Squidward asks why everything is chrome, Spongetron gives the most matter-of-fact explanation possible. Everything is chrome in the future. That's it. That's the entire explanation for this massive environmental and social change. The episode treats universal chrome plating like a natural law of futuristic physics. To drive this point home in the most absurd way possible, they show a truck pulling up to a single flower that somehow managed to grow in this metallic wasteland. A fish gets out, carefully spray paints the flower silver, and drives away without a word. They're literally committing botanical genocide to maintain the chrome aesthetic, and it's played for laughs. This scene raises so many questions that will never be answered. Is there a department of chromification? Are there chrome police who patrol for unauthorized organic matter? What happened to people who refuse to get chrome plated? Spongetron mentions almost casually that he has clones, 486 of them, one for each letter of the alphabet. This throwaway line contains implications that are staggering when you think about them. Over 2 millennia, civilization added 460 new letters to the alphabet. What are these letters? What sounds do they represent? Who decided the alphabet needed to be nearly 500 letters long? The episode drops this absolutely mind-blowing fact and moves on like it's perfectly normal, which is either genius-level world-building or complete madness. When Squidward begs to return to his own time period, Spongetron doesn't treat this as a big request requiring special authorization. He casually mentions that the time machine is down the hall to the left, like he's giving directions to a restroom. This future society treats time travel the way we treat public transportation. Just another everyday convenience that anyone can use whenever they want. Squidward's first attempt to find the time machine goes horribly wrong when he walks into what turns out to be a can opener room. The door literally processes him like he's a tin can, turning him into a spring-shaped mess of flesh that somehow reforms back into normal Squidward shape. This suggests that the future has industrialized body modification to the point where being accidentally processed by kitchen equipment is just a minor inconvenience. Spongetron directs him to the correct door, and the actual time machine looks like someone crossed a phone booth with a slot machine, which is probably the most accurate description of time travel ever conceived. The interface is beautifully simple, just a lever that can be set to past or future with a key to activate it. Squidward sets the machine to past and ends up in prehistoric Bikini Bottom, which looks like what would happen if the Flintstones took place underwater. Here, he encounters caveman versions of SpongeBob and Patrick, who are somehow the exact same species as their modern descendants, but with the intelligence and behavior of early humans. These prehistoric versions are absolutely terrified of jellyfish, which creates an interesting contrast with their descendants' enthusiasm for jellyfishing. They keep running around screaming in primitive terror while accidentally shocking themselves trying to touch the jellyfish with their bare hands, like they're repeatedly trying to pet electric fences. Squidward gets completely fed up with their screaming, which is interfering with his plans to finally play clarinet in peace. In a moment of frustrated pragmatism, he tears pieces off their loincloths and fashions the first jellyfishing nets in history. He demonstrates proper jellyfish catching technique, and the primitive creatures are amazed by this revolutionary concept. Here's where the episode reveals its cruel genius. Squidward just invented jellyfishing, the exact activity he was trying to escape by traveling through time in the first place. He's created a perfect causal loop where his attempt to avoid jellyfishing literally causes jellyfishing to exist. Every time SpongeBob has ever asked him to go jellyfishing throughout history, it's because Squidward taught primitive SpongeBob how to do it. When Squidward finally sits down to play his clarinet in this peaceful prehistoric setting, the cavemen hear the music and immediately go absolutely berserk. The clarinet sound affects them like some kind of ancient curse or primitive rock concert gone wrong. They chase him back to the time machine with pure fury. In his panic, Squidward frantically messes with the time machine controls and snaps the lever off completely. The machine starts spinning through dimensions like a cosmic slot machine. The display shows future spinning before landing on 2 lemons and a bar, while a robotic voice announces, "Loser." The time machine has basically told Squidward that he's failed at time travel itself. Squidward ends up in the most disturbing part of the episode, a place called Nowhere that represents the ultimate fulfillment of his desires. This is exactly what it sounds like, a completely white void where Squidward finally gets his wish to be truly alone, away from SpongeBob, Patrick, and every other living creature in the universe. But the universe has a twisted sense of humor, and his perfect solitude immediately becomes psychological torture. Disembodied voices start chanting alone, alone, in an endless hypnotic loop that sounds like some kind of existential nightmare made audible. This part is genuinely creepy, like something out of a psychological horror film that accidentally wandered into a children's cartoon. Squidward tries to run away from the voices, but this dimension operates on nightmare logic where escape is impossible. He keeps ending up in the same spot no matter which direction he runs. A few colored tiles appear occasionally, giving brief hope for substance, but they float away when Squidward touches them like mirages, mocking his desire for something real. The endless white space and repetitive voices turn what should be Squidward's ultimate victory into his ultimate defeat. Finally, after running in circles and getting nowhere, Squidward has a complete mental breakdown. He stamps his foot in absolute frustration, accidentally crashes through the floor of reality itself, and tumbles back into the time machine while sobbing uncontrollably. He cries that he wants to go home, that he misses Bikini Bottom, and most importantly, that he even misses SpongeBob. At this point, you've got to wonder, was this episode brilliant nonsense or just total chaos? Like, did they mean for this to be a psychological horror story in the middle of a SpongeBob cartoon? I want to know what you think. Drop a comment if this episode messed with your brain the way it did Squidward's. The moment he admits he misses SpongeBob, the time machine responds to his emotional honesty rather than any mechanical controls and brings him back to the present. SpongeBob and Patrick are still standing outside his house in exactly the same positions, like no time has passed at all from their perspective. When they see him emerge, they cheerfully ask if he's finally ready to go jellyfishing, as if interdimensional time travel is perfectly normal. Squidward, still traumatized from his journey, completely loses it. He screams that he'll never be ready for jellyfishing and demands to know who invented such a stupid game in the first place. SpongeBob and Patrick look at him with confused innocence and calmly inform him, "You are Squidward." The realization hits him. He's responsible for his own misery across thousands of years of history. He's created the ultimate temporal paradox where he's trapped in an eternal loop of his own making. The episode ends with Squidward declaring, "I'm going back," presumably to try to fix this paradox. SB-129 became instantly legendary among SpongeBob fans because it proved that kids' shows could be genuinely bizarre without completely losing their audience. The episode was unlike anything that had been on children's television before. A time travel story that ignored every rule of science fiction storytelling while somehow creating genuine emotional stakes. The 2,000 years later time card became immediately quotable and is still used online to indicate long passage of time. Primitive SpongeBob's surprised face when Squidward calls them simpletons launched thousands of reaction images across social media. The Nowhere Dimension's alone chanting became a reference point for existential dread in children's media. Fans immediately started creating theories about the Chrome future, the expanded alphabet, and the mechanics of time travel that the episode never bothered to explain. The long-term impact of SB-129 extends far beyond internet meme culture and into how we think about children's entertainment and storytelling in general. The episode established a template for how animated shows could be weird. Not random weird, but confidently weird with genuine emotional consequences and character development. It proved that kids could handle genuinely unsettling content like existential horror and temporal paradoxes as long as it was wrapped in humor and served the story. The episode's influence can be seen in later cartoons that weren't afraid to get genuinely strange, from Adventure Time's cosmic horror episodes to Rick and Morty's casual treatment of interdimensional travel. SB-129 demonstrated that audiences would follow creators into completely bizarre territory as long as they committed fully to whatever insane premise they were exploring, regardless of scientific possibility. In an era where most children's content gets focus grouped to death and sanitized for maximum broad appeal, this episode remains a monument to creative risk-taking that makes absolutely no scientific sense, but works perfectly on an emotional and comedic level. The episode's casual treatment of impossible concepts, freezer time machines, chrome futures, alphabet expansion, temporal paradoxes, showed that sometimes the best way to handle fantastic elements is to just present them as established facts and move on without extensive explanation. 25 years later, SB129 still stands as proof that the weirdest, most illogical ideas can become the most unforgettable and emotionally resonant stories. Now we're going to talk about what happened to every classic SpongeBob character, and make sure to subscribe to our channel. Classic SpongeBob was a wide-eyed optimist chasing jellyfish. Now he's a hyperactive goof chasing punchlines. Classic Patrick was a simple-minded friend with hidden wisdom. Now he's a loud, clueless idiot. Classic Squidward was a bitter artist trapped in mediocrity. Now he's a walking punchline stuck in slapstick. Since the show's release, these classic SpongeBob characters have changed, and not for the better. They've been flanderized into shallow caricatures, mere shells of who they once were. In this video, we're going to break down what really happened to every classic SpongeBob character. SpongeBob SquarePants has changed a lot since the early seasons, and if you've been watching from the beginning, the difference is hard to ignore. Classic SpongeBob, especially in seasons 1 to 3, was a genuinely lovable character. He was positive but not annoying, excited but not childish, loyal but not clingy, and hardworking without being obsessive. He cared about his friends and found joy in the little things, which made him relatable and admirable. His humor felt natural, and his emotional intelligence grounded his silly moments, giving the character a lot of heart. But starting around season 4, SpongeBob's character began to shift. His positivity became forced and overbearing, his innocent excitement turned into immature, baby-like behavior, and his loyalty morphed into obsessive clinginess. Even his work ethic was exaggerated to the point of unhealthy perfectionism. What used to be endearing traits were blown out of proportion, turning SpongeBob into a cartoonish version of his former self, losing much of the emotional balance that once made him great. You can clearly see this change when comparing two episodes, Band Geeks from Season 2 and SpongeBob's Place from Season 10. In Band Geeks, Squidward is challenged to form a band for the Bubble Bowl. Despite Squidward constantly putting him down, SpongeBob stays determined to help. He rallies the group, gives a heartfelt speech when things fall apart, and helps deliver an incredible performance of sweet victory. His positivity here isn't forced. It comes from genuine care for Squidward. His loyalty motivates him to help others, not to control them. His excitement brings people together and creates something meaningful. Fast forward to SpongeBob's Place, and it's a different story. When Mr. Krabs temporarily kicks SpongeBob out of the Krusty Krab, SpongeBob opens his own restaurant, but instead of showing the same joy for cooking, he becomes a control freak. His work ethic turns into obsessive micromanagement. His excitement becomes manic energy, and his positivity is stubborn delusion. Rather than supporting those around him, he pushes them away with his selfish behavior. And instead of handling setbacks with emotional intelligence, he throws tantrums like a child. The contrast between these two episodes highlights what went wrong. Classic SpongeBob's traits helped others and made him lovable. Modern SpongeBob's exaggerated traits alienate those around him and make him exhausting to watch. What was once a positive role model became a shallow caricature, where emotional depth was traded for cheap slapstick. At his best, SpongeBob inspired people with his kindness, determination, and joy. But over time, the writers pushed his personality so far that those qualities became flaws. And in the process, they lost the heart that made the show truly special. While SpongeBob went from caring and smart to childish and loud, Patrick went from clever and thoughtful to just silly and clueless. Patrick Star has always been SpongeBob's best friend, but like SpongeBob himself, he's changed a lot over the years, and not for the better. Classic Patrick was lazy and simple-minded, but also chill, occasionally clever, and genuinely cared about his friendship. He had a calm, fun presence, and could surprise you with smart ideas or sneaky tricks, making him more than just the dumb sidekick. But modern Patrick shows what happens when those traits are exaggerated beyond recognition. His chill attitude became aggressive laziness, his simplicity turned into painful stupidity, his sneaky side became destructive chaos, and his care for SpongeBob turned into selfish neediness. Instead of a lovable goof, Patrick became a loud, clueless wrecking ball who causes problems instead of helping solve them. You can see this clearly by comparing the secret box from Season 2 with the Great Patty Caper from Season 7. In the secret box, Patrick keeps a mysterious box away from SpongeBob, creating a fun back-and-forth dynamic. He stays calm, clever, and in control, managing to protect his secret while still messing with SpongeBob in a playful way. Even when SpongeBob betrays his trust by sneaking into his house, Patrick sets a clear boundary, showing that he values their friendship. And in the end, Patrick outsmarts him with a hidden compartment, proving he was a step ahead the whole time. Now compare that to the great Patty Caper. Patrick joins SpongeBob on a train to recover the stolen Krabby Patty formula, but instead of helping, he spends the whole episode being useless and destructive. He wastes time washing dishes and eating snacks during an investigation, asks ridiculous questions like whether someone is a werewolf, and can't focus on anything important. When the train is out of control, Patrick misreads the controls and breaks the brake and throttle, making the situation worse. His actions aren't funny or clever, just frustrating. The contrast is clear. Classic Patrick was lazy but loyal, simple but sometimes smart, and chill but emotionally aware. Modern Patrick is just an idiot who breaks things and makes situations worse for everyone around him. His original traits had charm because they were balanced. He was SpongeBob's equal in a different way. Relaxed where SpongeBob was hyper, sneaky where SpongeBob was innocent, grounded where SpongeBob was excitable, but by pushing those traits too far, the writers turned Patrick into a shallow caricature. His calmness became selfish laziness, his simplicity became painful stupidity, and his loyalty became annoying dependence. What made Patrick special is gone, replaced with random chaos that leaves you wondering why SpongeBob would even want him around. While Patrick went from clever to chaotic and SpongeBob from caring to childish, Squidward's change from relatable to just mean shows how the show lost its heart. Squidward Tentacles has always been the grumpy neighbor of SpongeBob SquarePants, but like every main character, he's been drastically changed over time. In the early seasons, Squidward was sarcastic, frustrated, and bitter, but in ways that felt grounded. He was an underappreciated artist stuck in a dull job, surrounded by loud neighbors, and his misery made sense. He wasn't just mean for the sake of it. He had real emotions, occasional vulnerability, and even rare moments of kindness that made him feel like a real person. Classic Squidward had depth. His sarcasm was sharp and witty, his anger stemmed from real-life frustrations, and his loneliness was subtle but relatable. Episodes like Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost, Season 1, showed how his antics came from exhaustion, not cruelty. When he pretends to be a ghost to get peace and quiet, it's playful mischief, not malice. And when SpongeBob and Patrick take it too far, Squidward panics, and you actually feel for him. He had boundaries, emotional nuance, and a hint of humanity under the grumpiness. But starting around Season 4, that balance began to fade. Modern Squidward is what happens when the writers push his traits too far. His sarcasm became cold cruelty. His bitterness turned into arrogant superiority, and his vulnerability morphed into constant whining. Any kindness or growth he once showed is nearly gone. Instead of a relatable pessimist, he became a flat, mean-spirited caricature. You can see the contrast in Squidward's School for Grown-Ups, Season 8. When Patrick grows a beard and decides he's suddenly mature, Squidward takes it as an opportunity to mold him into a refined adult. But unlike his classic self, he's not just trying to escape noise or find peace, he's driven by ego. He drags Patrick to fancy restaurants and museums, not to help him grow, but to feel superior. When SpongeBob tries to join them, Squidward cruelly has him thrown out of the museum. His actions feel less like frustration and more like unchecked arrogance. Worse, there's no emotional payoff. Squidward learns nothing, grows in no way, and ends the episode getting pelted with food, not as a result of poetic justice, but just because. His role becomes predictable and empty. Be mean, then suffer. Classic Squidward worked because he was layered. We've all felt stuck in jobs, annoyed by others, or overlooked for our talents. That made him relatable, but modern Squidward lacks that depth. His defining traits, sarcasm, bitterness, vulnerability, have been distorted into extremes, turning a nuanced character into a one-note cartoon villain. And with that, the show lost one of its most human characters. While Squidward went from a relatable character to a cartoon, Mr. Krabs went from a caring businessman to just a greedy villain. Before I tell you about Mr. Krabs, make sure to subscribe to our channel, and now let's get back to where we left off. Eugene Krabs has always loved money, but in the early seasons of SpongeBob SquarePants, his character had much more depth. Classic Mr. Krabs was cheap and business-minded, but he also cared about his restaurant, took pride in his work, and looked out for his employees in his own gruff way. His love for profit was balanced by genuine pride in the Krusty Krab and moments of real concern for SpongeBob and Squidward. Modern Mr. Krabs, starting around season 4, exaggerates all his traits to absurd extremes. His business smarts became pure, unchecked greed. His pride in the Krusty Krab turned into an obsession with profit at all costs. His tough love for his employees warped into outright exploitation. Instead of a hardworking businessman with flaws, he became a one-note villain driven only by money, no matter who gets hurt. You can see this shift clearly when comparing Pickles from season 1 and the Krabby Chronicle from season 6. In Pickles, SpongeBob loses his confidence when Bubble Bass tricks him into thinking he forgot the pickles. Mr. Krabs is concerned about the business, but he doesn't just fire SpongeBob or yell at him. Instead, he sits down with him for days, patiently helping him regain his confidence. His pride in SpongeBob's recovery feels genuine. He's proud of his employee, not just happy about making money again. Now look at the Krabby Chronicle. Mr. Krabs starts a newspaper to make extra cash, but when honest stories don't sell, he pushes SpongeBob to write harmful lies about the townspeople. Mrs. Puff's driving school gets shut down, Larry loses his gym membership, and Plankton's business is destroyed. Unlike in Pickles, where Mr. Krabs showed compassion, here he doesn't care who gets hurt. He dismisses SpongeBob's concerns, threatens his job, and counts his money while the town suffers. When the angry townspeople confront him, he responds by counterfeiting money rather than learning any lesson. The difference is night and day. Classic Mr. Krabs was cheap but human, his flaws were relatable, and his moments of care made him more than just a greedy boss. Modern Mr. Krabs is driven by greed alone, turning him into a shallow, heartless caricature. What made Mr. Krabs interesting in the early seasons was the balance between his love of money and his pride in the Krusty Krab, as well as his hidden care for his employees. But when those qualities were pushed to the extreme, the character lost all nuance. Now, Mr. Krabs exists only to be greedy and cause chaos, stripping away the relatable flaws that once made him work. While Mr. Krabs became a pure villain, Sandy lost her edge, turning into a more conventional character. Sandy Cheeks might seem consistent on the surface, but over time, her character has changed dramatically. Early Sandy was smart, fiercely independent, adventurous, and confident in ways that felt earned. She wasn't just the science character or the tough girl. She was a self-made pioneer who built an underwater home, fought sea monsters, and mastered karate. Her friendship with SpongeBob felt natural because she was someone who truly lived life to the fullest. But starting around season 4, Sandy's character began to shift. Her fierce independence became watered down into more conventional family values. Her scientific genius was simplified into basic problem solving. Her love of adventure was toned down into cautious responsibility, and her confident, adventurous spirit was replaced with quiet, domestic concern. Rather than standing out, she became a more typical background character. You can clearly see this by comparing T at the Tree Dome from season 1 and Sandy's nutty nieces from season 12. In Tea at the Tree Dome, Sandy's introduction instantly shows what makes her special. She's battling a giant clam underwater, wearing a self-made air helmet that lets her live in an environment where she shouldn't survive. When SpongeBob tries to save her, she effortlessly handles the situation herself, showing her superior fighting skills and survival instincts. And when SpongeBob and Patrick are dehydrated in her tree dome, she uses her scientific knowledge and compassion to quickly create water helmets for them. This episode shows Sandy's traits working in perfect harmony. Her independence lets her thrive in a hostile environment, her science smarts help her solve real problems, and her love of adventure makes her fearless in the face of danger. Her confidence isn't just attitude, it's earned through real achievements. Now compare that to Sandy's nutty nieces. Here, Sandy's role is reduced to babysitting her mischievous nieces. Instead of showcasing her brilliance or adventurous spirit, the episode focuses on her juggling family chaos and building a gift for her nieces. While she still solves problems, it's basic household problem solving, not the daring inventions or survival feats she once accomplished. The contrast is striking. Classic Sandy tackled giant clams and engineered underwater habitats. Modern Sandy babysits nieces and manages domestic mishaps. Her once bold confidence has been softened into mild responsibility, and her adventurous spirit has been replaced by caretaking. charming. Sandy was once inspiring because she showed what you could accomplish through skill and courage, but by turning her into a conventional supporting character, the writers stripped away what made her special. Modern Sandy is still smart and positive, but no longer the fearless trailblazer she used to be. Sandy went from an independent genius to a more conventional character, just as Plankton went from a real threat to a comedic figure. Plankton has changed a lot over the years. In the early seasons of SpongeBob SquarePants, he was a genuinely smart and dangerous villain. His schemes to steal the Krabby Patty formula were clever, his rivalry with Mr. Krabs was serious, and his determination made him a real threat. But starting around season 4, Plankton's character shifted. His intelligence became bumbling incompetence, his menace turned into pathetic failure, and his drive for success became emotional neediness. Instead of a dangerous villain, he became a joke. You can see this contrast by comparing Plankton from season 1 with Plankton's pet from season 9. In Plankton, his debut, we meet a serious antagonist who's been after the Krabby Patty formula for years. He's clever from the start, hiding inside a Krabby Patty to sneak into the Krusty Krab, then adapting his plan when it fails. He quickly shifts tactics, manipulating SpongeBob by pretending to be his friend and offering gifts. When that fails, he escalates further, building a mind control device to take over SpongeBob's brain. It's dark, smart, and genuinely threatening. Even when his plan backfires, Plankton stays in character. Angry, relentless, and still obsessed with his goal. Now look at Plankton's pet. The episode opens with Karen suggesting that Plankton should get a pet because his obsession with the Krabby Patty formula is burning him out. Right away, his villainous drive is played off as something pathetic, not dangerous. SpongeBob even helps him adopt a pet, which feels wrong. Why would SpongeBob help his enemy? Because modern Plankton isn't threatening anymore. The entire episode focuses on Plankton training a tiny amoeba to fetch him a Krabby Patty. But instead of pulling off an evil scheme, the amoeba eats the patty, and Plankton's big response is to put his pet in timeout. This is a far cry from the mind-controlling villain we saw earlier. Later, when the pet runs away, Plankton becomes sad and emotional, going on a heartfelt search for his lost pet, with SpongeBob's help. The difference between these episodes is massive. Classic Plankton was funny because his ambition was huge for such a tiny creature, and his schemes were genuinely smart. When he failed, it was a relief because the stakes felt real. Modern Plankton fails because he's a bumbling loser, and the humor comes from how pathetic he's become. His intelligence, threat level, and motivation were all dialed down into weak, predictable cartoon gags. The sad part is that Plankton's original traits, his intellect, menace, and adaptability, made him a truly unique villain. But by exaggerating his flaws and stripping away his strengths, the writers turned him into just another sad, predictable cartoon character. Now we'll talk about the difference between classic and modern SpongeBob. It's been a hot topic of debate whether modern SpongeBob is better or worse than classic SpongeBob. Classic SpongeBob aired from 1999 to 2004, while modern SpongeBob ran from 2009 to the present. In this video, we're going to look at which version of the show is actually better by looking at how each one handles humor, character development, animation style, storylines, and then seeing which version wins more categories. This is classic SpongeBob versus modern SpongeBob. But before we get started, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Let's get started with character consistency, something that really shows us the difference between early and modern SpongeBob. Classic SpongeBob had this incredible emotional depth that made him feel like a real person, despite being a cartoon sponge. In Band Geeks, for example, when he sees Squidward's devastation, classic SpongeBob thinks about the situation carefully. He considers what Squidward means to him and responds with surprising maturity. The line about Squidward being there when it was convenient for him is perfect, because it's both honest and caring. Classic SpongeBob understood people's flaws, but chose to focus on their good qualities. His happiness felt real and genuine, coming from a place of true care for those around him. Now, contrast that with the Splinter, where modern SpongeBob is completely different. His reaction to a tiny splinter is so over the top and disconnected from any real feeling that it feels insulting to the original character. The screaming, the weird imagery, and the extreme panic, none of it comes from a place of genuine emotion. It's just chaos for the sake of humor. Modern SpongeBob has completely lost his problem-solving skills and emotional smarts. Classic SpongeBob would have handled even a splinter with his usual optimism and determination. Instead, modern SpongeBob bounces between extreme emotional reactions without any logical flow. He feels like a character who is just reacting to whatever is happening, instead of thoughtfully responding like the classic SpongeBob we know. but the problem extends far beyond just the main character. Classic Patrick was genuinely lovable despite his laziness and simple nature. He had this underlying sweetness and loyalty that made his friendship with classic SpongeBob feel real and meaningful. Modern Patrick has become actively mean and harmful, often seeming to enjoy causing problems or hurting others. Classic Squidward was relatable in his grumpiness. We all have that coworker who finds us annoying, but there was still humanity underneath his irritation. He had moments of genuine care for classic SpongeBob. Modern Squidward has become this bitter, nasty character who seems to exist only to suffer or to make others suffer. Mr. Krabs changed from a flawed but understandable businessman into a one-dimensional greed monster. Classic Mr. Krabs was cheap and money-focused, sure, but he still showed genuine care for classic SpongeBob and had moments of generosity. Modern Mr. Krabs would literally sell his own mother for a nickel. Even Sandy lost her scientific curiosity and problem-solving nature, becoming just the character from Texas who occasionally shows up to do karate. Mrs. Puff went from being a reasonable driving instructor, dealing with an impossible student, to someone who actively dreams about harming modern SpongeBob. The tragedy is that all these characters used to feel like real people with complex reasons and relationships. Now, they're just walking collections of their most extreme traits, bouncing off each other in increasingly cartoonish ways without any of the heart that made their interactions meaningful in the first place. Classic SpongeBob absolutely dominates in this category. Early SpongeBob was a fully realized character, while modern SpongeBob feels like random reactions between commercials. As SpongeBob changed, the humor did too. Now let's examine the humor evolution. And honestly, this might be the most frustrating change of all. Here's something that really gets under my skin about modern SpongeBob. They completely threw away what made the humor special in the first place. Classic SpongeBob had this perfect recipe of clever writing, subtle wordplay, and genuinely heartfelt moments that made you laugh and feel something. Now, it's just loud noises and random stuff happening. Let me show you what I mean with Dying for Pie from Season 2. This episode is comedy gold because it works on multiple levels. You've got Squidward accidentally buying an explosive pie from pirates, thinking SpongeBob ate it, and spending the whole day trying to make SpongeBob's last hours meaningful. The humor comes from the dramatic irony. We know SpongeBob never actually ate the pie, but watching Squidward's guilt drive him to actually care about SpongeBob is both hilarious and touching. The jokes in this episode are smart. When SpongeBob makes Squidward a sweater out of his own eyelashes, it's gross but endearing. When he makes another one out of his tears, it's absurd but still grounded in SpongeBob's genuine love for his friend. The comedy builds naturally from the characters and their relationships. Even the slapstick, like Mr. Krabs getting blown up by a tiny crumb, serves the story and feels earned. Now compare that to Pathos from The Patrick Star Show. This episode is basically disconnected segments loosely tied together by a telethon premise. You've got Patrick hosting a fundraiser for snails who can't dance, which sounds promising, but then it just devolves into random bits. There's a Frankenstein parody with Dr. Plankenstein that has nothing to do with anything. Sandy keeps barging in with increasingly ridiculous inventions that don't work. Grand Pat does some over-the-top stunt that makes no sense. The humor in Patathon relies entirely on being weird for the sake of being weird. There's just random visual gags and loud sound effects. It's like they thought kids like crazy stuff, and completely forgot that the original show worked because it had heart underneath all the silliness. Classic SpongeBob understood that the best comedy comes from character. SpongeBob's optimism was the engine that drove most of the show's funniest moments. His innocent misunderstandings, his earnest attempts to help people, his childlike wonder at the world, these traits created natural comedy situations that felt authentic. Modern SpongeBob seems to think louder equals funnier. Instead of SpongeBob's sweet naivety causing gentle chaos, now he's just screaming and doing random things. The subtlety is gone. The wordplay is gone. The clever visual gags that adults could appreciate alongside kids, also gone. Classic SpongeBob takes this one easily. The difference between smart comedy and random noise is impossible to ignore, as the humor went from clever character moments to random chaos. The storytelling moved from simple, effective plots to disconnected, pointless gags. Now let's look at which was actually better at storytelling. Classic SpongeBob understood something crucial. The best plots come from character. Take Graveyard Shift from Season 2. The entire episode springs from one simple premise: SpongeBob and Squidward working the night shift at the Krusty Krab. That's it. Just two characters we know and love, thrown into a slightly unusual situation. What makes Graveyard Shift brilliant is how it builds tension through character dynamics. Squidward, annoyed and looking for entertainment, tells SpongeBob a scary story about hash-slinging slasher. The horror comes from SpongeBob's genuine fear and Squidward's growing realization that his made-up story might be coming true. Every plot point serves the characters, SpongeBob's innocence, Squidward's cynicism turning to terror, and their reluctant bond when facing danger together. The episode has structure. It builds suspense methodically through the three signs: flickering lights, silent phone calls, and the mysterious bus. When the slasher finally arrives, the reveal that he's just a nervous job applicant is both funny and satisfying because it resolves the tension in a way that makes sense. And Nosferatu flickering the lights? Pure genius. A visual gag that doesn't overshadow the main story. Now compare that to SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout from Season 12. This 44-minute special throws everything at the wall: live-action sequences, celebrity cameos, surface world adventures, elaborate party planning subplot, and Patchy the Pirate traveling across the country. It's about 6 different stories crammed together with no emotional through line. The problem is that none of these elaborate setups serve the characters. SpongeBob goes to the surface world, but we don't learn anything new about him. The party planning creates chaos, but it doesn't reveal anything meaningful about his relationships. The celebrity birthday wishes are just there. They exist because someone thought they'd be fun, not because they advance any kind of narrative. Modern SpongeBob seems to think that more equals better. More locations, more characters, more chaos, more randomness. But storytelling is about making every element count. Classic episodes felt intimate and focused. Modern episodes feel scattered and exhausting. What really bothers me is how classic SpongeBob trusted its audience to care about small moments. SpongeBob being afraid of the dark was enough for an entire episode because the writers understood that relatability creates investment. Modern SpongeBob seems to assume viewers need constant stimulation, so it throws increasingly bizarre scenarios at us. The shift represents a fundamental misunderstanding of what made SpongeBob special. It was the genuine heart underneath all the silliness. When storytelling becomes just an excuse to string together random gags and celebrity appearances, you lose that emotional core. Classic SpongeBob focused on exploring what a situation could teach the character. Modern SpongeBob, however, is more about creating the weirdest scenarios possible. That change really shows everything that's gone wrong with the show's direction. Classic SpongeBob wins this round without question. The storytelling gap between focused, character-driven narratives and chaotic spectacle is massive. Classic SpongeBob focused on character-driven stories, while modern SpongeBob's chaos is balanced by sharper, more creative animation. Now let's talk about animation style. I know this sounds crazy, but I think modern SpongeBob's digital animation is actually better than the classic hand-drawn style, and here's why. Digital animation gave creators new ways to make jokes that the early seasons could never do. Let's talk about House Fancy from Season 6. Yes, it looks clean and polished, but that control helps the comedy in ways hand-drawn animation just couldn't. When Squidward's house gets destroyed by the vacuum, the joke works because of that digital control. The animators can show each piece of furniture getting sucked up in perfect detail, making a satisfying visual that builds the comedy. Hand-drawn animation would have made this scene feel messy and hard to follow, completely ruining the humor. The clean look that critics complain about is actually artistic control. Modern SpongeBob can make exactly the visual the creators want, rather than hoping a hand-drawn frame looks right. This means when they do push limits, like in episodes such as Face Freeze or The Splinter, they can create truly weird, impossible faces that would be nearly impossible to draw the same way every time with traditional animation. Take the gross toenail scene from House Fancy. Love it or hate it, that level of detailed grossness needs digital control. The animators can control every part of the visual to make the biggest impact. Classic SpongeBob's rough edges would have actually made moments like these softer and less effective. Modern digital techniques also allow for better visual storytelling. Episodes can use complex camera moves, detailed backgrounds, and layered visual effects that help tell the story. When SpongeBob's imagination runs wild in modern episodes, the animation can actually show us impossible things with clarity that makes the weird stuff feel even weirder. The happy accidents that classic animation fans love weren't always good. Sometimes they were just problems. When an animator's hand slipped or a frame came out wobbly, that was just the reality of the medium. Modern animation gets rid of those technical problems. letting artists be more careful about when and how they break the rules. What critics call committee-designed animation is actually the result of having better tools and more control. Modern SpongeBob can keep visual consistency while still pushing creative limits. The characters still move with cartoon physics, expressions are still wildly exaggerated, and the humor is still visual. It's just done with more precision. The irony is that digital animation has actually made SpongeBob more cartoonish, not less. Modern episodes can stretch faces further, bend bodies in more impossible ways, and create visual gags that would be too expensive or technically impossible with hand-drawn methods. The animation now serves the comedy better because it can make any visual idea the writers dream up. Classic SpongeBob was limited by what human hands could draw in the time and budget constraints of TV production. Modern SpongeBob is limited only by imagination. Which sounds more creative to you? The shift to digital was about giving artists the tools to tell better visual stories. Modern SpongeBob's animation doesn't just look different, it works differently, serving the comedy with precision that classic animation, for all its charm, simply couldn't match. Sometimes the best art comes from having the right tools for the job, not from accepting problems as features. Modern SpongeBob comes out ahead here. The technical capabilities alone make it the clear winner for pure animation quality. As the animation became cleaner and more perfect, the emotional tone changed too, losing the warmth and real feelings that made the old episodes special. But before we continue the video, make sure you're subscribed to our channel, and now let's get back to where we left off. Now let's discuss the emotional depth, and this is where the loss really stings. You know what really hits me when I watch old episodes? There's this emotional warmth that wraps around you like a comfortable blanket. Classic SpongeBob had genuine heart. The show understood that beneath all the silly jokes, there was something deeper. Friendship, optimism, and believing in yourself when the world thinks you're crazy. Take the sponge who could fly from season 3. Classic SpongeBob wants to fly with the jellyfish, and yeah, it sounds ridiculous. But watch how the episode treats his dream, with respect, sincerity, and genuine emotional weight. When townspeople mock him as the Birdman of Bikini Bottom, you actually feel bad for classic SpongeBob. His pain is real, and when he finally achieves his dream through friendship with the jellyfish, it's genuinely moving. That moment when the jellyfish lift classic SpongeBob up, pure magic. It's corny, but it works because the emotional foundation is solid. Classic episodes trusted its audience to care about these characters as real beings with real feeling. But somewhere along the way, something changed, like the Krabby Patty that ate Bikini Bottom from season 8. On paper, it could explore consequences and responsibility. Mr. Krabs' greed literally creates a monster threatening everyone. But instead of exploring the emotional weight, the episode treats it like a B-movie parody. When modern SpongeBob absorbs the giant patty to save everyone, it should be heroic and meaningful. Instead, it feels like just another weird thing happening in an episode full of weird things. Characters react to this massive crisis with the same energy they'd use discussing lunch. Mr. Krabs, who used to be greedy but recognizably human, becomes a cartoon villain whose only motivation is money. There's no emotional complexity, no moments where you see the person beneath the caricature. Classic Mr. Krabs was greedy, but you could still understand him. What's telling is how the shows handle emotional beats differently. Classic episodes let moments breathe. When classic SpongeBob felt sad or disappointed, the show acknowledged those feelings and gave them space. Humor came from character interactions, not from undercutting every serious moment with random gags. Modern episodes seem almost afraid of genuine emotion. Whenever something heartfelt threatens to emerge, it's quickly buried under absurdist humor or exaggerated reactions. It's like the show doesn't trust audiences will stick around for the quiet, sincere moments that made early seasons special. Here's what bothers me. Classic episodes proved you could be both funny and emotionally genuine. You didn't have to choose between heart and humor. The best episodes had both in perfect balance. The Sponge Who Could Fly is hilarious precisely because it takes classic SpongeBob's dream seriously. Classic SpongeBob absolutely destroys modern SpongeBob in this category. The emotional gap is so wide, it's almost unfair to compare them. As the show lost its emotional depth, it started to become more creative in its own way. The next section we have is creativity, and I think people are being way too harsh on modern SpongeBob's creativity. Sure, it's different from the classic episodes, but that doesn't mean it's worse. Modern episodes face a challenge that classic episodes never had. How do you stay creative when you've already done everything? Think about Squid's visit from season 6. Critics say it's predictable because modern SpongeBob wants Squidward to visit his house, so he recreates Squidward's entire house inside his own pineapple. But wait, isn't that actually incredibly creative? The idea of building someone else's house inside your house just to get them to visit is completely insane and brilliant at the same time. Those 492 self-portraits are a perfect example of how modern episodes find new ways to push boundaries. Classic episodes never would have gone that far, but modern episodes aren't afraid to explore stranger territory. Here's what people miss. After 20 plus years, coming up with totally new ideas is nearly impossible. The real creativity is in finding fresh ways to twist familiar concepts. When modern episodes take something we've seen before and push it further than expected, that takes skill. Take episodes like My Leg. This follows background character Fred through multiple episodes, giving him a full story arc. That's a creative way of exploring the show's universe in new and unexpected ways. Modern episodes also aren't afraid to get really experimental in ways classic episodes avoided. Episodes like Squidward in Clarinet Land or SpongeBob in Random Land dive into surreal territory. These episodes show the creators are still willing to take big creative risks. The escalation instead of innovation criticism misses the point. Sometimes making things bigger, louder, or more extreme is the innovation. When you've already done the quiet, subtle version of a joke, the creative challenge becomes, how far can we push this before it breaks? Yes, some modern episodes play it safe and stick to proven formulas. But even the safe episodes often include creative touches that show the writers are still thinking outside the box. The real question is whether it's creative in ways that work for today's audience. Maybe kids today want different kinds of surprises than kids from 20 years ago. Modern episodes' creativity might not feel revolutionary anymore, but it doesn't need to be. The show already changed cartoon comedy forever. Now the creativity is in finding ways to keep that magic alive while still surprising people who think they know everything the show has to offer. Modern SpongeBob actually pulls ahead in this section. The creative challenges of staying fresh after decades give it a surprising edge. Now let's talk about SpongeBob's cultural impact. Classic SpongeBob's cultural dominance is undeniable. Those first 3 seasons created a shared language. The jokes were smart but silly, and somehow managed to appeal to both kids and adults without talking down to either group. Think about all the stuff from those early seasons that's still everywhere today. Is mayonnaise an instrument? I'm ready. The Krusty Krab pizza is the pizza for you and me. These became part of how we talk. The mocking SpongeBob meme, Sweet Victory from Band Geeks, the chocolate lady, that stuff is basically internet history now. What made classic SpongeBob so culturally powerful was that it didn't talk down to anyone. Kids could laugh at SpongeBob being goofy, but adults could appreciate Squidward's existential crisis or Patrick's accidentally profound stupidity. Episodes like Chocolate with Nuts or The Hash-Slinging Slasher were genuinely funny, no matter how old you were. This cross-generational appeal is what made it a true cultural phenomenon. But then something changed around season 4. Modern SpongeBob started feeling different culturally. The humor got more slapstick, more in your face. While kids today still love it, modern SpongeBob doesn't have that same cultural grip. Don't get me wrong, modern SpongeBob isn't terrible. The animation got way better, the episodes are more elaborate, and kids today still love it. But it doesn't have that same cultural grip. When's the last time you saw a meme from a recent SpongeBob episode blow up the way old ones still do? Here's the real difference. Classic SpongeBob created moments that everyone remembers, regardless of when they watched it. Modern SpongeBob makes content that's popular with its current audience but doesn't stick around. It's like the difference between a song that becomes a classic and one that's just a hit for a few months. This isn't just a SpongeBob thing either. Look at The Simpsons. Everyone agrees the early seasons were better. But SpongeBob was different because it became part of internet culture before internet culture was even really a thing, Those early episodes were creating memes before we knew what memes were. The crazy part is how well classic SpongeBob holds up. I can watch Band Geeks right now and it's still hilarious. When the Super Bowl teased Sweet Victory a few years ago, the entire internet went nuts. That's the power of those first 3 seasons. Modern SpongeBob is fine. It's decent TV that happens to have familiar characters. But classic SpongeBob was something else entirely. It was this perfect mix of weird humor, good writing, and perfect timing that somehow captured what it felt like to be a kid while being smart enough for adults. The Yellow Sponge's real legacy is that those first 3 seasons created a shared language that an entire generation still uses. Classic SpongeBob wins this no questions asked. But what do you think? Has modern SpongeBob managed to create the same cultural impact as the classic era? Or do you think those first 3 seasons will always be the true cultural touchstone? Let me know in the comments. The cultural impact of SpongeBob's early years created a shared language across generations. But as the show evolved, its appeal to different age groups became less consistent. The next category we have is audience appeal, and this one is very interesting because this reveals something fascinating about how the show has evolved. Classic SpongeBob appealed to both kids and adults, whilst modern SpongeBob has become way too childish. Ripped Pants from season 1 shows what made early episodes special. On the surface, it's about classic SpongeBob ripping his pants and getting laughs. Kids love the silly comedy, but older viewers get something deeper. We've all found something that gets us attention, then overdone it until everyone gets tired of us. The episode deals with real themes like feeling insecure and wanting to fit in. When classic SpongeBob fakes drowning just to make another ripped pants joke, it shows someone making bad choices to stay popular. The final song, where classic SpongeBob thinks about losing friends by being the fool who ripped his pants, actually hits hard. Adults see their own mistakes in classic SpongeBob's story, while kids just enjoy the catchy song. This layered approach was classic episode's secret weapon. The show trusted that kids could handle stories with real feelings, while adults could enjoy the smart character work underneath. Classic episodes found humor and heart that worked for everyone. Compare that to Patrick's Staycation from season 8. Patrick takes a vacation at home with modern SpongeBob playing different hotel workers. It's creative and funny, but notice how different the humor is. Where classic episodes built comedy through character relationships and real emotions, modern episodes rely on crazy situations and visual gags. Patrick's demands get more ridiculous, modern SpongeBob's costume changes get more elaborate, and the situations feel less connected to anything we might actually experience. The modern approach focuses on surprising viewers with unexpected visual comedy and quick gags. Kids probably love the energy, but for older viewers who connected with the emotional honesty of early seasons, something feels missing. Has the show evolved to better serve kids, or lost something important? Modern episodes often feel designed for short attention spans and quick laughs, perfect for YouTube clips, but maybe less satisfying as complete stories. This shift might reflect bigger changes in kids' entertainment. Maybe today's kids prefer faster pacing and more visual excitement. Maybe the multi-age viewing experience that defined classic episodes was always temporary. But classic episodes proved something important. You don't have to choose between entertaining children and creating good storytelling. The best episodes treated young viewers with respect, offering real emotions wrapped in colorful, fun packaging. Modern episodes still have moments that capture that magic, but they feel less consistent. The show seems less confident that children can handle emotional depth, choosing safer, surface-level humor instead. Maybe this change was inevitable. Maybe expecting a cartoon to keep cross-age appeal for over 20 years is unrealistic. But classic episodes set such a high bar that anything less feels like a step back. Classic SpongeBob dominates this comparison. The multi-generational appeal it achieved is something modern episodes rarely even attempt to match. Classic SpongeBob mixed emotions and creativity with surprise, but modern episodes often repeat the same old ideas, making the show feel less fresh and varied. Finally, let's talk about episode variation. One of the best things about classic episodes was how you never knew what kind of episode you'd get. Turn on the TV and you might find classic SpongeBob and Patrick camping, selling chocolate, or helping Squidward have a good day. Each episode felt like opening a surprise gift. You knew it would be fun, but the story was always different. Jellyfishing from season 1 shows this perfectly. It's just classic SpongeBob SpongeBob and Patrick going jellyfishing and trying to include Squidward, but watch how many different things happen. Friendship moments, funny accidents, adventure, and payback at the end. The episode starts simple, becomes instructional, turns into action, and ends with justice. Classic episodes felt like mini-movies with their own personalities. Some were quiet character stories, others were high-energy adventures. The show constantly switched between small moments and big spectacles. This variety kept viewers interested because we really didn't know what to expect. Early seasons weren't afraid to try new things. Some episodes stayed in one place, others were road trips. This willingness to experiment made every episode feel fresh, even when using familiar characters. Compare this to The Krusty Slammer from season 12. While entertaining, it follows a predictable pattern. Someone gets in trouble, the Krusty Krab gets changed, chaos happens, things go back to normal with a twist. It's the same basic structure we've seen when the restaurant becomes other things: a hotel, stadium, theater, and now a prison. Modern episodes often feel like the show has favorite formulas that get repeated with small changes. Many episodes now use familiar scenarios. Modern SpongeBob annoys Squidward, Patrick misunderstands something obvious, Mr. Krabs gets greedy, or the Krusty Krab faces some crisis. When these become the main source of conflict, the show feels predictable. The locations have become more limited too. Where classic episodes might take us anywhere from Sandy's home to mysterious underwater cities, modern episodes often stick to the same Bikini Bottom spots we already know. The sense of discovery has mostly disappeared. This shift toward formula isn't surprising. After 20 plus years, any show would struggle to stay fresh. Writers naturally use what works, and audiences often prefer familiar comfort over constant surprises. But something valuable has been lost. Classic episodes proved that kids' shows can be really creative and still easy to follow. Each episode felt fresh, like the creators were trying new ideas instead of just repeating what worked before. This made every episode feel special. Modern episodes sometimes bring back that classic variety, and when they do, they remind us why the show became so popular. But too often, they feel like variations on familiar themes rather than genuine surprises. Maybe the real question is whether we're asking too much from a show that's already given us so many different kinds of fun. Perhaps the formula exists because it works. Classic SpongeBob wins easily here. The variety just isn't close. Classic SpongeBob scored a solid 7 points, while modern SpongeBob only gets 2 points, which shows us that classic SpongeBob is better than modern SpongeBob. But do you agree with me, or do you think modern SpongeBob has its own strengths? Let me know in the comments. Now that we talked about their differences, let's talk about what actually will happen if classic and modern SpongeBob met. Classic SpongeBob wouldn't get along with modern SpongeBob. Why? Because classic SpongeBob got annoyed over small things. He had boundaries. Modern SpongeBob is loud, overly affectionate, and never stops smiling. Put them in the same room, and it wouldn't take long before classic SpongeBob snaps.
All right, that's it. No more Mr. Nice Guy.
In this video, we'll be breaking down what if classic and modern SpongeBob met. Let's talk about Can You Spare a Dime, and why it perfectly shows who classic SpongeBob really was as a character. This episode demonstrates everything that made early SpongeBob feel real: his genuine kindness, his loyalty, and most importantly, his very human breaking point. When Squidward quits his job after being accused of stealing Mr. Krabs' dime, SpongeBob immediately follows him outside. He genuinely cares what happens to Squidward, even though Squidward has never been particularly nice to him. SpongeBob tries to convince Squidward to come back, but when that doesn't work, he doesn't push it. Instead, he tells Squidward that if he ever needs help, SpongeBob will be there. This shows emotional maturity. He offers support without trying to control Squidward's choices. Later, when SpongeBob finds Squidward homeless and living in a cardboard box, his response is immediate: "You can come live with me." This is pure kindness from someone who sees a friend in trouble and instinctively wants to help. At first, SpongeBob happily takes care of Squidward. He makes breakfast in bed, gives massages, tends to every need. You can see that SpongeBob genuinely enjoys helping people. It's not a burden for him. This level of dedication is admirable, but it's also setting him up for problems. Months pass. Squidward is just lying in bed making demands and complaints. When Squidward rejects lemonade because the lemon has 3 seeds, I can't eat anything odd-numbered, SpongeBob's smile falters for just a moment. This is brilliant character writing. SpongeBob recognizes he's being taken advantage advantage of, but because he's fundamentally kind, he tries to give Squidward the benefit of the doubt. Still, his frustration starts showing through passive-aggressive comments. SpongeBob tries dropping hints by alphabet soup spelling "get a job," newspaper job listings, even a puppet show about employment. When none of this works, something finally snaps inside him. He pushes Squidward's bed through the wall and drags him to the Krusty Krab. When Mr. Krabs won't rehire Squidward over the missing dime, SpongeBob grabs Mr. Krabs by the throat and calls him a crustaceous cheapskate. This explosion feels earned because we've watched SpongeBob's patience slowly erode. His anger is genuine human frustration from someone who gave everything and got nothing back. Classic SpongeBob had limits, and that's what made him feel real. "Can you spare a dime?" shows SpongeBob's kindness and limits, while Breath of Fresh Squidward turns him into an annoying shouting mess. Real people have quiet moments. They have days where they're content but not bouncing off the walls. They understand that other people need space sometimes. Modern SpongeBob lost all of that complexity and became a one-note character whose only job is to be as loud and energetic as possible. He's exhausting to watch because he never stops. Modern SpongeBob is just loud and crazy all the time, but classic SpongeBob shows real feelings and acts like a real person. A Breath of Fresh Squidward perfectly shows that classic SpongeBob would probably get annoyed at modern SpongeBob in a similar way. This episode reveals a SpongeBob who become a hyperactive cartoon machine that runs on pure noise and energy. Throughout this episode, SpongeBob is constantly yelling. Everything he says comes out at maximum volume with maximum excitement. When Squidward gets shocked by his electric fence and becomes friendly, you'd think SpongeBob would be happy and grateful. Instead, he becomes obsessive and territorial. Watch how SpongeBob reacts to having a nicer Squidward around. He completely loses his mind with excitement. He's bouncing off the walls, screaming about how great this is, acting like he's never experienced friendship before in his life. This isn't how real people react to good news. Real people might be pleased or surprised, but they don't turn into shrieking cartoon characters. Modern SpongeBob has no emotional regulation whatsoever. The worst part comes when Squidward starts being successful at work and hanging out with Patrick. Instead of being happy that his friend is doing well, SpongeBob becomes jealous and possessive. He literally screams at Squidward about how nobody can pogo dance with Patrick except him. Think about how ridiculous this is. SpongeBob is treating Patrick like his personal property and Squidward like an intruder. Now, this is obsession. Real friends don't get territorial when their other friends hang out together, but modern SpongeBob doesn't understand normal social boundaries. He only has one setting: extreme attachment. He can't just be happy that two people he cares about are getting along. Instead, he has a complete meltdown at Patrick's party. What's most telling about this episode is how SpongeBob handles every situation the same way. Real people have quiet moments. They have days where they're content but not bouncing off the walls. They understand that other people need space sometimes. Modern SpongeBob lost all of that complexity and became a one-note character whose only job is to be as loud and energetic as possible. He's exhausting to watch because he never stops. Modern SpongeBob is just loud and crazy all the time, but classic SpongeBob shows real feelings and acts like a real person. This stark contrast in character means they probably wouldn't get along too well. Pizza delivery is one of the best examples of who classic SpongeBob really was as a character. This episode shows his loyalty, his determination, and most importantly, his very real emotional limits. He's a person with genuine feelings that can break. When Mr. Krabs decides the Krusty Krab should deliver pizza, SpongeBob is genuinely excited, but it's not the manic excitement of someone who's lost touch with reality. He's proud because this feels historic. The first Krusty Krab pizza ever. Throughout their journey in the desert, SpongeBob stays optimistic with his pioneer tricks and his famous pizza song. This shows his natural tendency to look on the bright side, but it feels real. He's trying to make the best of a bad situation, which is what real people do when they're stuck somewhere they don't want to be. The most telling moment comes when Squidward tries to eat the pizza. SpongeBob physically fights Squidward for it. He runs away, refuses to give up, and gets genuinely aggressive about protecting the pizza. This is someone who takes his responsibilities seriously and won't let anyone mess with something he cares about. SpongeBob believes this pizza delivery matters, so he's willing to fight for it. That kind of dedication feels human and relatable. But classic SpongeBob also has limits. When they're lost and hungry, and Squidward keeps dismissing his pioneer tricks, you can see SpongeBob getting frustrated. He's someone trying his best while dealing with a companion who's constantly negative. SpongeBob does all the work, stays positive, while Squidward just complains. Any real person would get annoyed by this, and SpongeBob SpongeBob does too. The ending shows classic SpongeBob's most human moment. When the customer rejects the pizza because there's no drink, which he never ordered, SpongeBob breaks down completely. He falls to the ground crying, absorbing his own tears. This is genuine heartbreak from someone who really believed in what he was doing. SpongeBob spent the entire episode talking about making history with this delivery. When it gets rejected for a stupid reason, his devastation feels real. Classic SpongeBob worked because he had the full range of human emotions. He could be optimistic and determined, but also frustrated and heartbroken. He could fight for what he believed in, but also cry when things went wrong. These emotions felt earned because they came from real situations with real stakes. He was a person trying his best in difficult circumstances, with all the complexity that comes with being human. Classic SpongeBob shows a character with real feelings and human struggles. While modern SpongeBob has lost all depth and now only knows how to be loud and blindly cheerful no matter what happens. If you're enjoying this breakdown, don't forget to subscribe button. Now let's get back to it. The Googly Artiste perfectly shows how modern SpongeBob lost all sense of reality and became a relentlessly cheerful cartoon machine. This episode reveals a character who doesn't read situations, doesn't pick up on social cues, and just bounces through life with aggressive positivity no matter what's happening around him. Throughout this episode, SpongeBob is aggressively supportive of Patrick's terrible art, rocks with googly eyes glued on them. When an art critic shows up and starts throwing money around, SpongeBob doesn't question anything. He just bounces around being excited because that's his only setting. Any normal person would find this situation weird. A random critic appears out of nowhere, calls Patrick a genius for gluing eyes on rocks, and immediately hands over $500. That's suspicious. But modern SpongeBob doesn't think. He just cheers and celebrates like he's programmed to be positive about everything. The most telling part is how SpongeBob treats Squidward throughout the episode. Squidward is clearly frustrated that his actual art gets insulted while Patrick's garbage gets praised. But modern SpongeBob just keeps being relentlessly upbeat. He doesn't comfort Squidward or show any understanding of how this might feel. He's too busy being excited about Patrick's success to notice that someone else is hurting. This shows how modern SpongeBob lost the ability to read emotions or respond appropriately to social situations. He's like a cheerleader who never stops cheering, regardless of what's actually happening. Modern SpongeBob treats everyone the same. Too much, too loud, too fast. He hugs people too much, gets too excited about minor things, and acts like every moment is the best thing that's ever happened. This is exhausting. Real people need space and quiet moments. They don't want someone bouncing off the walls at them constantly. What's most frustrating about modern SpongeBob in this episode is how flat he feels emotionally. No matter what happens, SpongeBob reacts the same way. Big smile, bouncing around, zero awareness of who's hurting around him. Real people have complex reactions to complex situations. They might feel happy for a friend's success while also feeling bad for another friend who got hurt. They might be excited about something while also feeling confused or concerned about how it happened. Modern SpongeBob lost all of that complexity. He became a cartoon character who exists to make noise and move fast. He's like someone took the idea of optimism and removed all the humanity from it. Modern SpongeBob is a one-note cartoon who ignores real feelings and just yells happiness nonstop, while classic SpongeBob shows real emotions and struggles in genuine friendships. Krusty Love is a perfect example of how classic SpongeBob felt like a real person with genuine emotions and complex relationships. This episode shows SpongeBob experiencing jealousy, frustration, confusion, and genuine care for someone he loves, all while dealing with being caught in the middle of an impossible situation. From the very beginning, you can see that SpongeBob genuinely cares about Mr. Krabs as more than just a boss. When Mr. Krabs gets nervous about talking to Mrs. Puff, SpongeBob immediately jumps in to help. He introduces them, translates Mr. Krabs' gibberish, and genuinely wants his boss to be happy. This isn't SpongeBob being helpful because it's his job or because he's programmed to be nice. You can see in his expressions and actions that he actually cares about Mr. Krabs' feelings. When Mr. Krabs is too nervous to speak, SpongeBob feels bad for him and wants to fix the situation. That's real friendship, not just cartoon kindness. When Mr. Krabs asks SpongeBob to help control his spending on the second date, SpongeBob agrees without hesitation. Mr. Krabs gives him his wallet and tells him not to let him spend any money, no matter what. SpongeBob takes this responsibility seriously because he wants to help his friend. This shows another side of classic SpongeBob. He's reliable and trustworthy. When someone he cares about asks for help, he actually commits to helping them succeed. SpongeBob understands that Mr. Krabs is struggling with something and needs support. Here's where the episode gets really interesting from a character perspective. Mr. Krabs immediately starts asking SpongeBob to buy things for Mrs. Puff, flowers, chocolates, a hat, expensive gifts. Each time SpongeBob does what Mr. Krabs asks, Mr. Krabs yells at him for spending money. Watch SpongeBob's face during these scenes. You can see his confusion and frustration building. He's trying to do what Mr. Krabs asked him to do, but Mr. Krabs keeps giving him contradictory instructions. SpongeBob tries to explain this several times. "I'm trying, Mr. Krabs, but you keep telling me to buy things for Mrs. Puff." This is a realistic human emotion. Anyone would get frustrated being put in this position. SpongeBob is someone trying to help a friend who keeps changing the rules. The brilliant thing about this episode is how it builds SpongeBob's frustration slowly and realistically. First, he's confused, then he tries to explain the problem calmly. When that doesn't work, he gets more direct about pointing out the contradiction. Finally, SpongeBob reaches his breaking point. When Mr. Krabs asks him if Mrs. Puff will need a dryer to go with the washing machine, SpongeBob explodes in a stream of gibberish that's clearly meant to be swearing. Mrs. Puff has to look up the words in a dictionary and blushes at what she finds. This moment feels earned because we've watched SpongeBob's patience slowly wear away. His anger is genuine human frustration from someone who's been put in an impossible situation by someone they care about. What makes this episode so good for showing SpongeBob's character is that even when he's angry, you can tell he still cares about Mr. Krabs. He's mad because he's trying to help, and Mr. Krabs won't let him succeed. When Mr. Krabs starts crying and talking about being a lonely old crustacean who's found love, SpongeBob immediately softens. "Mr. Krabs, don't cry, Mr. Krabs. Come on." He can't stand to see Mr. Krabs upset, even though Mr. Krabs just put him through an incredibly frustrating experience. This episode works because it shows how real relationships function. People who care about each other can still frustrate each other. You can love someone and still get angry when they're being unreasonable. You can want to help someone while also feeling annoyed that they're making it impossible to help them. Classic SpongeBob had this kind of emotional complexity. He wasn't just a source of endless positivity. He was someone with real feelings who reacted realistically to the situations around him. When Mr. Krabs put him in an impossible position, SpongeBob got frustrated. When Mr. Krabs seemed genuinely upset, SpongeBob's anger melted away because he cared more about his friend's happiness than his own frustration. Krusty Love shows classic SpongeBob as a fully realized character with genuine emotional depth. He experiences jealousy, frustration, confusion, anger, and compassion, sometimes all in the same episode. These emotions feel real because they come from real situations and real relationships. SpongeBob's reaction to being caught between Mr. Krabs and his spending problem feels human because it is human. Anyone would get frustrated in that situation, and anyone who truly cared about their friend would keep trying to help despite that frustration. That's what made classic SpongeBob so special. He felt like a real person, not just a cartoon character. Classic SpongeBob was a real person with real feelings, but modern SpongeBob is just a loud cartoon that lost all heart. SpongeBob, You're Fired shows how modern SpongeBob lost what made him feel real and became loud and over the top instead. This episode reveals a SpongeBob who doesn't feel like a real person anymore. He's become a cartoon machine that runs on pure volume and exaggerated reactions instead of genuine human emotion. From the very beginning of this episode, SpongeBob is operating at maximum energy for no reason. He's making Krabby Patties with insane enthusiasm, splitting himself into multiple mini SpongeBobs, flying around the restaurant like he's on a sugar rush. This isn't someone enjoying their job. This is someone who's been cranked up to 11 and left there. When Mr. Krabs tells him he's fired, SpongeBob's reaction is completely cartoonish. He literally floods the entire Krusty Krab with his tears. The restaurant fills up with water from his crying. Real people don't cry enough to flood buildings. Real people might tear up, feel shocked, or get angry when they lose a job they love. But modern SpongeBob only knows how to react in the most extreme way possible. What's most telling about this episode is how SpongeBob handles unemployment. Unshaven, disheveled, acting like a child who can't take care of himself. He sits around in pajamas, drinking coffee and feeling sorry for himself, but even his depression is exaggerated and cartoonish. He's not genuinely sad about losing something important to him. He's just performing sadness in the loudest way possible. When Patrick shows up to cheer him up, SpongeBob immediately goes along with the fun employment idea, bouncing between extreme sadness and forced cheerfulness. This shows how modern SpongeBob lost emotional stability. Real adults might feel down about losing a job, but they don't completely fall apart and need their friend to teach them how to live. SpongeBob acts like a toddler who needs constant guidance and entertainment. The whole middle section of the episode treats unemployment like a fun adventure. SpongeBob and Patrick go around bothering Squidward, taking naps, and eating weird food at Sandy's. Losing his job should be huge, but SpongeBob treats it like a weekend off. When SpongeBob decides to look for work, he he immediately transforms back into his hyperactive self. His 5 o'clock shadow disappears, his clothes become neat, and he starts singing about being ready for a new job. This instant transformation shows how shallow his emotions really are. Real people don't switch between depression and excitement like flipping a light switch. But modern SpongeBob treats every emotion like a costume he can put on and take off whenever the plot needs it. The most frustrating part of this episode is watching SpongeBob make the exact same mistake at every restaurant. He turns hot dogs into weenie patties, pizza into pizza patties, burritos into burrito patties. Every single time, he acts surprised when he gets fired. Each time he gets fired, he reacts with the same over-the-top shock and sadness. He doesn't adapt, doesn't think, doesn't show any sign of intelligence or problem-solving skills. He just keeps doing the same thing and acting surprised by the same result. When the restaurant owners start fighting over him at the end, SpongeBob just goes along with it, screaming and getting tossed around like a rag doll. He has no agency, no control over his situation, no realistic reaction to being literally kidnapped and chained up. This episode perfectly captures what went wrong with modern SpongeBob's character. He became a source of constant noise and movement instead of genuine personality. His emotions are performed rather than felt. His reactions are designed to be as loud and extreme as possible rather than realistic or relatable. Modern SpongeBob doesn't feel like someone you could know or understand. He feels like a cartoon character, designed by committee to be as hyperactive and loud as possible. Every emotion is turned up to maximum volume, which means none of his emotions actually mean anything. Real people have quiet moments, complex feelings, and realistic reactions to difficult situations. Modern SpongeBob lost all of that and became pure cartoon chaos. He's exhausting to watch because he never stops, never thinks, and never shows genuine human emotion. Just louder and louder cartoon noises disguised as feelings. In the end, if these two versions of SpongeBob ever crossed paths, it wouldn't go well. Classic SpongeBob had limits. He cared deeply, but he also knew when enough was enough. Modern SpongeBob, he's all noise, no boundaries, and wouldn't give classic SpongeBob a moment of peace. Where one version valued real friendship and honest feelings, the other is trapped in constant, empty excitement. Classic SpongeBob wouldn't just find him annoying, he'd see him as a hollow version of what he once was. And that's the real tragedy here. A character who once felt human has been reduced to nothing but loud energy. Now that we talked about the difference between classic and SpongeBob character, let's talk about when the whole show started becoming gross. What if I told you that SpongeBob SquarePants went from a fun kids show to something so gross that parents had to leave the room? There's this one specific moment where everything just went completely off the rails and the show became obsessed with pus, toenail ripping, and stuff so disgusting that entire countries even wanted to ban it from airing. Early SpongeBob had like maybe 5 gross moments total across 3 whole seasons, but then suddenly we're getting entire episodes that are full of gross things. The craziest part? There's actual evidence of this transformation. Fans made compilation videos just to show how bad it got, and some episodes are still talked about as the most disturbing things ever put on children's television. We're gonna go through 5 phases here: the innocent stuff, the warning signs, the complete disaster that ruined everything, when gross became normal, and the absolute grossest point that nearly killed the show. Trust me, once you see the exact episode that started this nightmare, you'll understand why people say SpongeBob literally died in 2008. Before we continue the video, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Early SpongeBob from seasons 1 through 3 used gross out humor sparingly and kept it completely innocent. The show had maybe 5 brief gross moments across 3 entire seasons, and they were all cartoonish and harmless. Steven Hillenburg knew what he was doing back then. He wanted SpongeBob to work for both kids and parents without being disgusting about it. The team took inspiration from classic cartoons like Looney Tunes, where someone gets bonked and sees stars, not realistic medical horror. These first 3 seasons from 1999 to 2004 were basically perfect and set up what SpongeBob was supposed to be. There was this unspoken rule in the early seasons that you can see if you pay attention. Any gross moment had to make sense, couldn't go on forever, and had to look like a cartoon, not something from a medical textbook. This wasn't by accident. Hillenburg and his team actually cared about not scarring kids for life. They knew families would be watching together, so everything had to pass the parent test. Look at Hall Monitor from season 1. SpongeBob gets nervous about being Hall Monitor and drools a little bit. That's it. 2 seconds and it's over, and it's relatable because real kids do that when they're nervous. No gross close-ups of saliva dripping everywhere for 30 seconds. In Suds, also from season 1, SpongeBob gets sick, but instead of showing realistic illness, they made his sickness literal soap bubbles coming out of his holes. It's actually clever and turned something that could be gross into silly cartoon magic. Even when they had perfect chances to get disgusting, seasons 1 through 3 held back. Gary Takes a Bath from season 2 could have been all about bathroom humor, but instead it's just Gary being a normal snail who doesn't want to get clean. The Paper from season 1 has Squidward get gum stuck to him, but they immediately make it into a joke instead of focusing on how gross gum is. These episodes show the creators actually knew what they were doing. These moments worked because they helped tell the story. SpongeBob's drooling showed he was nervous, the soap bubbles were a creative way to show being sick, and kids could relate without wanting to throw up. Parents could actually watch with their kids without cringing. The gross stuff was there when it made sense, but it never took over entire episodes like what was coming later. Here's what blows my mind about seasons 1, 2, and 3. I just listed basically every gross moment that exists in all 3 seasons. Over 60 episodes, and you can count the gross scenes on one hand. Compare that to later seasons where single episodes have more disgusting content than these 3 entire seasons combined. So now we move into seasons 4 and 5, and this is where things started to get a little weird. SpongeBob began experimenting with more frequent and slightly more detailed gross imagery. The show started pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable while still maintaining some restraint, but you could tell something was changing. After the first movie came out in 2004, Steven Hillenburg stepped back from day-to-day operations and new writers and directors joined the team. Season 4 started in 2005, and Season 5 ran from 2007 to 2008, and during this time the network probably wanted more edgy content to compete with other cartoons that were getting grosser. The thing is, most fans don't really blame Seasons 4 and 5 for being terrible, but looking back now, these seasons were basically the testing ground for the disaster that was coming. The warning signs were subtle at first, especially in Season 4. Gross moments became slightly more frequent, lasted a bit longer, and featured more realistic details. Season 4 episodes like Fear of a Krabby Patty started showing extended close-ups of characters looking disgusting and tired, with more detailed imagery than previous seasons. The gross-out moments started to linger instead of being quick gags. You could still watch these episodes and enjoy them, but there was definitely something different happening. By Season 5, things got more obvious. The show was testing how far it could push while still being acceptable for children, and episodes like Fungus Among Us basically became a preview of what was coming. This was an entire episode about fungus spreading throughout Bikini Bottom, featuring detailed shots of characters covered in realistic-looking fungus. When you watch this episode now, it's clear they were experimenting with medical imagery and seeing how audiences would react to more graphic content. What's interesting about Seasons 4 and 5 is that fans have mixed opinions on them. Some people say Season 4 was still pretty good and Season 5 was just okay, while others point to Season 5 as where the decline really started. Most fans started to notice the shift during these seasons, but many dismissed it as isolated incidents. The episodes were still mostly enjoyable, and the gross moments hadn't completely taken over the storytelling yet. You could still watch Seasons 4 and 5 with your kids without major problems, but there were definitely moments where you'd think, that was kind of weird, or they didn't need to show that. Looking back now, Seasons 4 and 5 served as a testing ground for the complete disaster that was coming in Season 6. The show learned that audiences would tolerate more graphic content, and unfortunately that gave them the green light to completely abandon restraint. These seasons basically set the stage for SpongeBob to transform from innocent cartoon humor into the gross-out obsessed nightmare it was about to become. But what do you think about Season 4 and 5? I felt like they were kind of gross at times, especially compared to the earlier seasons. And trust me, what's coming in Season 6 makes this look like a mild rash. You're about to see why fans call it the episode that killed SpongeBob. And here we are, Season 6 in 2008. This is where SpongeBob completely lost its mind and became obsessed with gross-out humor. Everything that made the show special just got thrown out the window, and what we got instead was basically medical horror. By 2008, Steven Hillenburg had stepped away from the day-to-day work on the show, and new people were calling the shots with a completely different idea of what SpongeBob should be. The restraint and charm of the early seasons was pretty much gone. Instead, the new team seemed to think that shock value and disgusting imagery were the only way to keep audiences interested. They were dead wrong, but they went all in on this approach anyway. Season 6 opened with House Fancy, and right away you knew something was seriously wrong. This episode has the infamous toenail ripping scene that still makes people cringe today. SpongeBob accidentally crushes Squidward's foot with a couch, and we get to watch in graphic detail as Squidward's toenail gets completely ripped off. It's realistic, it's painful to watch, and it serves absolutely no purpose in the story. They literally put it in there just to gross people out, and it worked way too well. But House Fancy was just the beginning. The real nightmare was The Splinter, which is basically 11 minutes of medical horror that somehow got approved for children's television. The episode episode starts with SpongeBob getting a tiny splinter at work, but instead of dealing with it like a normal cartoon would, we get to watch it become infected and disgusting. There are extended close-ups of pus, swelling, and grotesque medical imagery that looks like it belongs in a horror movie, not SpongeBob. Patrick shows up pretending to be a doctor and makes everything worse by putting garbage on the infected area, turning the splinter into this massive pus-filled boil. The episode ends with the splinter exploding and covering Mr. Krabs in pus and confetti. It's absolutely revolting, and these weren't the only gross episodes in Season 6. Porous Pockets had a scene where a clam is literally choking and gagging in disturbing detail. Pineapple Fever shows Squidward ripping his eyebrow off for no reason. Choir Boys has these gross close-ups of Squidward's veins and pimples that nobody asked for. The whole season was just obsessed with showing realistic bodily functions and medical problems in the most disgusting way possible. What really gets me is how fans still talk about Season 6 even now. I've seen comments from people saying they bought the full Season 6 DVD and literally had to stop eating lunch because of all the gross imagery. Other fans have said Season 6 gave us the most regrettable episodes both for viewers to watch and for what Nickelodeon put on air. They called it mean-spirited with SpongeBob being annoying and Patrick being unlikable, and mentioned that Season 6 has both the Splinter and other terrible episodes like Boating Buddies. Parents immediately recognized that something had gone terribly wrong. These episodes were so disturbing that families couldn't watch them together anymore. Kids were getting grossed out and upset, parents were horrified that this was supposed to be SpongeBob, and longtime fans started abandoning the show entirely. The magic was completely gone. Season 6 became known as the grossest season of SpongeBob ever, and officially started what fans call the dark age of the series. The toenail scene got banned in multiple countries because it was considered too graphic for children's television. The Splinter is still talked about today as one of the worst episodes ever made for kids, with some people calling it the episode that killed SpongeBob. Even Tom Kenny, SpongeBob's voice actor, reportedly hated the Splinter, which tells you everything you need to know about how bad things had gotten. But here's the wild part. It actually gets worse. You haven't even seen the episode where SpongeBob literally lets a monster try to eat Gary alive, and then blames Gary for it. Yeah, keep watching. So after the disaster that was Season 6, you'd think the creators would realize they messed up and try to fix things, right? Wrong. Season 7 in 2009 and 2010 somehow made everything worse by normalizing all the gross imagery while adding a nasty, mean-spirited edge to it. What had been shocking in Season 6 became just another Tuesday for SpongeBob writers. The creative team basically looked at all the complaints about Season 6 and said, "Hold my beer." They apparently thought that controversy meant they were onto something big. It's like they completely misunderstood why people were upset and decided the solution was to crank everything up to 11. Here's where Season 7 got really twisted. Instead of just showing disgusting stuff, they started combining it with genuine cruelty. Characters weren't just experiencing gross situations anymore, they were being tormented by them while everyone else laughed. The show had gone from innocent bathroom humor to something that felt genuinely sadistic. A pal for Gary is probably the perfect example of how messed up things had gotten. SpongeBob gets Gary this pet called Puffy Fluffy that looks like it crawled out of a horror movie. This thing has these massive drooling fangs and spends the entire episode trying to literally eat Gary alive. We get these close-up shots of its disgusting mouth and Gary running in terror, but here's the really sick part. SpongeBob completely ignores what's happening and blames Gary for everything. When Gary is literally being chased by a monster, SpongeBob tells him to be nice to Fluffy. When the thing is about to devour Gary, SpongeBob says, "Put Fluffy down right now, bad Gary." The episode ends with SpongeBob dragging Gary to work as punishment. It's depressing because it turns SpongeBob into this oblivious villain. Stuck in the Ringer takes a completely different approach but ends up just as twisted. SpongeBob gets stuck in this Ringer contraption, and we see his body getting painfully compressed and twisted in realistic detail. But instead of helping him, Patrick makes it worse by permanently gluing him in place. When SpongeBob understandably gets upset about being trapped and unable to live his life, the entire town turns against him for having a negative attitude. They literally tell him to stop complaining about being stuck in a torture device. Since when did Bikini Bottom become this cruel? But Season 7 wasn't done there. One course meal has Mr. Krabs deliberately trying to drive Plankton to suicide by exploiting his whale phobia, and we're supposed to laugh at Plankton's genuine terror. Keep Bikini Bottom Beautiful shows Squidward's house getting buried in mountains of rotting garbage. Squid's Visit has SpongeBob basically breaking into Squidward's house and redesigning it without permission, which crosses from annoying into genuinely creepy stalker behavior. Fans definitely noticed this shift toward meanness. I've seen people describe Seasons 6 and 7 as the period when SpongeBob became annoying, Patrick became a sociopath, and Squidward became a punching bag for increasingly elaborate torture. Some fans said they stopped watching entirely during this period because the show had become genuinely unpleasant to sit through. By the end of Season 7, having multiple gross scenes and at least one character getting psychologically tormented per episode had become the standard formula. What started as innocent cartoon slapstick had had evolved into something that felt mean-spirited and uncomfortable. And if you think that's disturbing, wait until we hit season 8. This is where the show starts melting faces, traumatizing pets, and making Squidward wear diapers. It's SpongeBob at its absolute worst, and you do not want to miss it. All right, we've reached seasons 8 through early season 9 from 2011 to 2012, and this is where SpongeBob hit its absolute peak for gross out content. If you thought the previous seasons were rough, this period took everything that was wrong with the show and cranked it up even further. By this point, the show seemed to have completely embraced the gross out approach as its main identity. Almost every episode had some kind of graphic imagery or uncomfortable situation, and you could tell they were really leaning into shock value over everything else. It felt like they'd figured out this formula and decided to stick with it no matter what. What's different about this era compared to seasons 6 and 7 is just how consistent the gross content became. Before, you might get one really disturbing episode and then a few normal ones, but during seasons 8 and early 9, the graphic stuff became pretty much standard. It was like they'd normalized it completely and forgot that it used to be the exception rather than the rule. Pet Sitter Pat is a pretty good example of how intense things had gotten. Patrick is supposed to watch Gary while SpongeBob visits his grandmother, but it turns into this situation where Gary is clearly having a bad time. We see Gary getting hungry and desperate, trying to eat paint chips because Patrick isn't feeding him properly. The house gets completely destroyed and Gary looks genuinely stressed out. Then somehow at the end, Gary and Patrick are suddenly friends, which doesn't really make sense given everything that just happened. Squid Baby might be the most uncomfortable episode from this whole period. Squidward gets bonked on the head and starts acting like a baby, but the way they animate it feels really awkward to watch. We see adult Squidward in diapers and sucking his thumb while SpongeBob and Patrick try to take care of him like he's an actual infant. The whole concept just feels weird, and the execution makes it even more uncomfortable. It's one of those episodes where you're not really sure what the joke is supposed to be. This era also had episodes like Demolition Doofus, where Mrs. Puff gets hurt and then tries to get revenge on SpongeBob in pretty aggressive ways. Are You Happy Now has Squidward getting really depressed because he can't remember ever being happy, which feels heavier than what SpongeBob usually deals with. Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom is mostly just SpongeBob and Patrick being annoying for the entire episode without much else happening. You could tell that the overall quality was different during this time too. The animation didn't look quite as polished, and some of the voice acting seemed less energetic than before. It felt like the show was being made more quickly or with less attention to detail than the earlier seasons. Fans started to notice that something was off during this period. Some parents mentioned having to skip certain episodes because they weren't comfortable with the content. Longtime viewers began talking about how different the show felt compared to what they remembered from the early days. The complaints became more frequent and more specific about particular episodes. The show's reputation definitely took a hit during this time. SpongeBob went from being this thing that everyone could enjoy to something that felt more divisive. People started being more careful about which episodes they'd recommend or watch with their kids. This period really did represent the furthest SpongeBob strayed from its original vision. The show had changed so much that it barely resembled what Steven Hillenburg had created back in 1999. It would take some significant changes, and eventually bringing back some original team members, to start moving things in a different direction. You'd think that after seasons 8 and early 9 nearly destroyed SpongeBob's reputation, someone would have stepped in and said, maybe we should dial this back a bit. But nope. Seasons 9B through 12 from 2012 to 2019 kept the gross out train rolling right along. Sure, Steven Hillenburg came back for a while, but the damage was already done and the show seemed stuck in this pattern it couldn't break out of. What's interesting about this period is that while some episodes tried to recapture the old SpongeBob magic, the gross out episodes kept coming like clockwork. It was like the writers had two completely different approaches. Sometimes they'd make a decent episode that reminded you why you used to love the show, and then the next week they'd air something that made you wonder if they'd learned anything at all from the previous disasters. The gross content during this era wasn't quite as relentlessly awful as seasons 8 and early 9, but it was still way more frequent and graphic than anything from the Golden Age. They'd managed to normalize disturbing imagery to the point where episodes that would have been shocking in season 1 now felt like just another Tuesday. The bar had been lowered so much that only moderately disturbing counted as an improvement. Ink Lemonade from season 11 is a perfect example of how the show was still obsessed with bodily functions and gross out humor. The entire episode revolves around Squidward's ink gland and SpongeBob harvesting it to make lemonade. We get these detailed shots of ink being extracted from Squidward's body and then people drinking it, which is just fundamentally gross. The episode treats it like it's this clever business idea, but really it's just another excuse to show bodily fluids. Cuddle E-Hugs from season 11 takes a different approach but ends up being equally disturbing. SpongeBob eats a rotten Krabby Patty and starts hallucinating this giant hamster that only he can see. The episode shows SpongeBob acting increasingly erratic and out of touch with reality, while everyone around him thinks he's losing his mind. For a kid's show, it's a surprisingly realistic depiction of someone having a psychological breakdown, complete with other characters getting genuinely worried about SpongeBob's mental state. Season 12 gave us episodes like SpongeBob's Big Birthday Blowout, which had some decent moments but also included Patrick getting his face melted off by cake batter in graphic detail. The Krusty Slammer shows the main characters getting thrown in prison and treated like actual criminals, which feels way darker than classic SpongeBob ever got. These episodes mix normal SpongeBob content with randomly gross or disturbing moments that don't really serve any purpose. What's frustrating about this period is that you can tell some people working on the show understood what made early SpongeBob special, but they couldn't seem to completely let go of the gross-out approach. It's like they were afraid that without the shock value, people wouldn't watch anymore. So you'd get episodes that were almost good, but then they'd throw in some unnecessary gross moment that ruined the whole thing. Even with Steven Hillenburg's return for part of this period, the show couldn't seem to fully shake off the gross-out obsession that had taken over. It was like the writers had forgotten how to make SpongeBob funny without relying on shock value and bodily functions. The DNA of the show had been fundamentally altered, and even the original creator couldn't completely fix what had been broken. This era proves that once a show goes down the gross-out path, it's really hard to find its way back. Even when SpongeBob tried to return to its roots, it kept falling back into the same patterns that had made it unwatchable for so many years. The gross content had become so normal that removing it felt like losing part of what the show had become, even though what it had become was terrible. So when did SpongeBob become gross? Easy answer, 2008, Season 6. House Fancy's toenail scene and the splinter basically ruined everything. Before that, SpongeBob had like 5 gross moments total across 3 seasons. After that, disgusting stuff became normal. The proof is everywhere. Fans made compilation videos showing how bad it got, parents stopped watching with their kids, even SpongeBob's voice actor reportedly hated some episodes. That's when you know things went too far. Look, SpongeBob is still super popular today and kids love it. The show's doing fine and entertaining millions of people, but it's totally different from what it used to be. The gross-out stuff that started in Season 6 just became part of what SpongeBob is now. Kids who grew up with the newer episodes don't see anything wrong with it because that's just SpongeBob to them, and that's cool. Everyone likes different things. 2008 changed SpongeBob forever. It went from innocent cartoon fun to something way grosser, and it never really went back. That's just what happened. But this is all just my opinion based on how I see the show's evolution over time. Plenty of people still enjoy modern SpongeBob and find the humor entertaining. There's nothing wrong with liking whatever version of the show appeals to you, whether that's the classic episodes or the newer ones. Now let's finally talk about why doesn't SpongeBob sound like he used to.
How did SpongeBob's voice go from sounding like this to sounding like this?
I'm waiting.
Well, it turns out it's the same voice actor who's been playing SpongeBob for over 25 years, and you probably didn't even notice the gradual change. So today, we're going through the entire evolution of SpongeBob's voice and finding out why Tom Kenny sounds so different now. But before we continue the video, make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Now, let's get started. How did SpongeBob's voice go from sounding like this cheerful, natural, high-pitched laugh to this more strained, falsetto version we hear today? Well, here's the crazy part. It's been the same voice actor this entire time. Tom Kenny has been voicing SpongeBob SquarePants for over 25 years, and you probably didn't even notice how gradually his voice has changed. So, today, we're diving deep into the evolution of one of the most iconic voices in animation and discovering why SpongeBob doesn't quite sound like he used to. Before we talk about how SpongeBob's voice changed, we need to understand how it was created in the first place. Back in the late 1990s, Tom Kenny was already an established voice actor and comedian. Growing up in East Syracuse, New York, Kenny was actually quite shy as a kid. He's mentioned in interviews that people assume he must have been the class clown, but he was actually more like the class clown's writer. Too shy to perform, but always coming up with funny ideas. Kenny turned to stand-up comedy as a teenager, testing his humor in nightclubs around Boston and San Francisco. This eventually led to appearances on late-night shows and cable comedy programs throughout the 1980s and 90s. His big break in voice acting came when he was performing at the Improv one night, and a representative from Cartoon Network happened to be in the audience. The rep was impressed by Kenny's ability to showcase multiple characters and asked if he'd ever considered voice acting for animation. He'd been doing stand-up comedy for years and had worked on shows like Rocko's Modern Life, where he voiced Heifer the Cow. But it was during his time on Rocko's that something truly magical happened that would change animation history. In an episode called Dear John, Kenny voiced a minor character, a female alligator named Al. This character only appeared briefly, but creator Steven Hillenburg was in the room that day as the creative director of Rocko's Modern Life. When Hillenburg later started developing his own show about a sea sponge, he remembered that specific voice. Kenny had actually forgotten exactly how he'd perform that character, so Hillenburg had to play him a clip of that old episode to remind him exactly how Al sounded. Kind of like a munchkin, but not quite. Kind of like a kid, but not in a Charlie Brown's child's voice way. This description perfectly captures what made SpongeBob so special. He had the enthusiasm of a child, but the responsibilities of an adult. The voice needed to be innocent and optimistic, but not so childish that adult viewers couldn't connect with it. When SpongeBob SquarePants premiered on May 1st, 1999, Tom Kenny was 37 years old and had complete control over his vocal range. If you listen to episodes from seasons 1 through 3, there's something distinctly natural about SpongeBob's voice. Yes, it was high-pitched, but it didn't sound forced or strained. It was genuinely cheerful and optimistic, matching the character's personality perfectly. During this period, the entire cast would record together in the same room, old radio show style. Kenny has mentioned how this collaborative environment helped create the show's special feel. When all the actors are responding to each other in real time, the performances feel more natural and energetic. Wednesday was recording day, and this schedule remained consistent from the very beginning. The creative team was also stable during this time. Steven Hillenburg was the showrunner, Derek Dreiman was the creative director, and they both sat in on recording sessions to direct the actors. This consistency and leadership meant that SpongeBob's voice remained consistent too. Kenny knew exactly what Hillenburg wanted from the character, and the direction was clear. If you go back and listen to classic SpongeBob episodes like Help Wanted, Sleepy Time, or Band Geeks, you'll hear what many fans consider the definitive SpongeBob voice. It's enthusiastic without being manic, childlike without being annoying, and most importantly, it sounds effortless. Remember in Chocolate with Nuts when SpongeBob yells, "Chocolate!" with such genuine excitement? That natural enthusiasm is what made his voice so memorable. It never felt forced or artificial. Or think about Pizza Delivery when SpongeBob sings the Krusty Krab pizza song. His voice has this warm, joyful quality that perfectly matches his optimistic personality. Then something changed. After the SpongeBob SquarePants movie was released in 2004, Steven Hillenburg stepped down as showrunner. He wanted the movie to serve as a series finale, a perfect conclusion to SpongeBob's story. But Nickelodeon had other plans. The show was too successful to end. When season 4 began, fans immediately noticed something was different. It wasn't just the writing or the animation that had changed. SpongeBob himself sounded different. Listen to SpongeBob's voice in Fear of a Krabby Patty, the very first episode after the movie, and compare it to something like Sleepy Time from season 1. The difference is subtle but unmistakable. The voice was still high-pitched, maybe even more so, but it had a different quality to it. What fans were hearing was the beginning of Tom Kenny's transition to a more falsetto-based approach to the character. Here's what was happening technically. Kenny's natural voice was beginning to deepen slightly with age, as happens with everyone. To maintain SpongeBob's characteristic high pitch, he started relying more heavily on falsetto techniques. But falsetto has a different resonance than a natural high voice. It's thinner, more strained, and lacks some of the warm undertones of Kenny's original approach. Fan forums from this era are filled with discussions about the voice change. Some described it as SpongeBob sounding more artificial, or higher, but also deeper at the same time. What they were identifying was the shift from natural high pitch to falsetto technique. You can really hear this if you compare SpongeBob's laugh in the Graveyard Shift from season 2, where it sounds completely natural and unforced, to his laugh in later episodes where it has that slightly strained falsetto quality. The production environment had changed too. Andrea Romano took over as the voice director starting in season 4, replacing the hands-on direction that Hillenburg and Dreiman had provided. New leadership often means new interpretations of how characters should sound, and that may have influenced Kenny's approach to the role. Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Tom Kenny is getting older. When SpongeBob premiered, Kenny was 37. Now he's 62 years old. That's 25 years of performing one of the most vocally demanding characters in animation. To put that in perspective, Kenny has been voicing SpongeBob for longer than some of his fans have been alive. Vocal aging is a real phenomenon that affects everyone, including voice actors. As we get older, our vocal cords naturally change. They become less flexible, lose some of their elasticity, and maintaining extreme vocal ranges becomes more physically demanding. Think of it like an athlete. A tennis player at 37 moves differently than the same player at 62, even if they're still incredibly skilled. For Kenny, this has meant that creating SpongeBob's high-pitched voice requires significantly more effort than it used to. What once came naturally now requires conscious technique and physical strain. Voice actors often describe extreme characters' voices as living in your throat, and after 25 years, that kind of vocal resonance takes its toll. Recent fans have noticed what they described as a drier quality to SpongeBob's voice in newer episodes. Some describe it as sounding more forced or strained, though this is just an observation of how the voice has evolved. Compare SpongeBob's excited "I'm ready" from the very first episode episode to the same phrase in recent season, and you'll hear the difference. The enthusiasm is still there, but the vocal quality has that slightly more effortful sound. Kenny has had to adapt his technique to work with his changing voice while still maintaining the essence of the character that fans love. The physical toll of voice acting is something that's very rarely discussed publicly, but it's very real. Many voice actors develop vocal problems later in their careers from repeatedly performing extreme voices. Kenny performs multiple characters on SpongeBob. Not just the title character, but also Gary the Snail, the French narrator, SpongeBob's father Harold, and Patchy the Pirate in live-action segments. Maintaining all these different voices for decades is genuinely impressive from a technical standpoint. There's also something to be said about muscle memory and vocal habits. After 25 years, Kenny's vocal cords have essentially been trained to perform SpongeBob's voice in a specific way. Even as his natural voice is aged, those muscle patterns remain. However, to achieve the same pitch and tone, he has to work harder and rely more heavily on techniques like breath support and falsetto positioning. Interestingly, Kenny has mentioned in interviews that he often gets requests from fans to record personal voice messages as SpongeBob. He's joked that these custom SpongeBob messages might be more common than factory default voicemails at this point. But even these brief vocal recordings require significant vocal preparation and technique. It's not just Kenny's voice that changed over the years. The entire production environment has evolved dramatically. Early episodes had that warm analog sound that fans associate with classic SpongeBob, while modern digital recording is cleaner but arguably less charming. The show's approach to character development has also shifted significantly. Early SpongeBob was optimistic and enthusiastic, but he was also relatively grounded in his own cartoon reality. Think about Rock Bottom. Even in that bizarre situation, SpongeBob's reactions felt genuine and relatable. Modern SpongeBob is more hyperactive, more exaggerated, and often pushes into almost manic territory. Compare that to episodes like Pet Sitter Pat or Ink Lemonade, where SpongeBob's energy levels are cranked up to 11. This evolution in character personality requires a correspondingly more extreme vocal performance. Kenny has had to adjust his voice to match this shift, making SpongeBob sound more energetic and childlike than in the original seasons. There's also the matter of the show's global reach and cultural impact. SpongeBob SquarePants is now a worldwide phenomenon, airing in dozens of countries and generating billions in revenue. With that kind of success comes pressure to make the character as universally appealing as possible. This might influence how Kenny approaches the voice, making it broader and more immediately recognizable to international audiences who might be watching dubbed versions. Kenny himself has revealed some fascinating details about the business side of voice acting. Union contracts typically pay voice actors for up to 3 characters per session, which explains why Kenny voices so many different characters on the show. It's economically efficient and showcases his incredible range. The scheduling has remained remarkably consistent though. Wednesday has been recording day since 1999, and Kenny has mentioned how much he values this routine. It takes about 4 hours to record an 11-minute episode, and the cast still tries to record together in the same room whenever possible, maintaining that old radio show style that Hillenburg originally envisioned. But even the studio environment has changed. The original Nickelodeon studio setup was different than modern recording facilities. Different microphone setups, different mixing boards. All of these factors contribute to how a voice ultimately sounds in the final product. Despite all of these changes, Tom Kenny continues to embrace the role of SpongeBob with enthusiasm. In recent interviews, he said that he and his fellow voice actor Bill Fagerback wouldn't trade jobs with the biggest movie stars in the world. The SpongeBob franchise keeps evolving. There are new movies, spin-off shows like Camp Coral and The Patrick Star Show, and even special broadcasts like the Super Bowl on Nickelodeon, where Kenny performed as SpongeBob in real time. Remember when SpongeBob and Patrick provided live commentary during Super Bowl 58? Kenny had to improvise as SpongeBob for hours, showing that even at 62, he can still bring that character to life spontaneously. Kenny has proven remarkably adaptable. He's found ways to maintain SpongeBob's essential character while working within the limitations of his changing voice. The laugh is still there, the enthusiasm is still there, and most importantly, the heart of the character remains intact. But this does raise questions about the future. Kenny is 62, and while he shows no signs of slowing down, voice acting is a physically demanding profession. At some point, Nickelodeon will have to consider what happens if Kenny can no longer perform the role. Finding a replacement for such an iconic voice would be incredibly challenging. For now, though, Kenny seems committed to continuing the role. The franchise keeps expanding, giving him new ways to explore the character. Whether it's a Broadway musical, a new movie, or just the regular series, SpongeBob continues to evolve, and Kenny evolves with him. So why doesn't SpongeBob sound like he used to? It's because of natural evolution of one man's voice over 25 years, combined with changes in production techniques, creative direction, and the character himself. Tom Kenny is SpongeBob SquarePants. His voice has been the constant thread connecting the naive Sponge from Help Wanted to the hyperactive character we see today. Yes, the voice has changed, but it's changed along with Kenny himself, along with the show's production, and along with our culture's relationship relationship with this beloved character. Whether he's delivering his classic "I'm ready" or screaming "my leg" as Fred the Fish, Kenny's vocal versatility has been the heart of Bikini Bottom for over 2 decades. The real question isn't whether SpongeBob sounds different. Of course he does. The question is whether we're ready for the day when Tom Kenny might have to pass the spatula to someone else. Until then, we can appreciate the incredible dedication of a voice actor who has spent over 2 decades bringing joy to millions of fans worldwide. One "I'm ready" at a time. And honestly, even if SpongeBob sounds a little different now, he's still the same optimistic, enthusiastic character we all fell in love with all those years ago. Sometimes change is about growing into something new while keeping what made you special in the first place. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.